Now, this is an incredible story. It's time for Health Watch, and we always like to find incredible stories. Now, this one is about a man who's lived with HIV since the 1980s, and it seems that he's been cured of the disease. Now, you hear of it a few times that this has happened, but this is, I think, the fourth time. The 66-year-old who doesn't want to be identified is just the fourth recorded case of someone overcoming the illness. Now, he was given a bone marrow transplant from a donor who was naturally resistant to the virus. So I'm now joined by Dr. Tristan Barker, who is a member of the British Association of Sexual Health and HIV. Really good to talk to you. This sounds incredible news and seems a lot more of a simpler procedure, because I've heard of people who've had to have their immune system stripped and then you get this. Now, this patient has been in remission now for 17 months. What more do we know about this and whether he's actually been cured?
Nana, thank you very much for having me with you. These cases are amazing. As you rightly said, this is the fourth case we have now that's very similar in terms of the treatment that someone receives, which is actually treatment for a type of cancer, a lymphoma type cancer usually. And these people receive a bone marrow transplant, and the donor has cells, as you've said, which are resistant to HIV infection. And what this means is that people who've received these bone marrow transplants can stay off of their usual HIV treatment, so usually daily tablets, and they don't have a detectable amount of virus in their blood. So essentially, they still have HIV, but it's not replicating in their bloodstream. It's quiet, if you like, and therefore they can be said to be functionally cured of HIV, and they don't take their usual tablets for treatment.
Wow. The question I want to ask, though, so in a sense they are in remission, as it were, because we don't know whether they're actually cured fully. But then can they pass the virus on even though the viral load is almost undetectable? Is there still a potential they can pass it on to somebody else?
So what we know about HIV treatment now is that it's very successful at suppressing the amount of virus that's in the bloodstream to an undetectable level. And when people are undetectable on treatment, they cannot transmit their virus sexually. Now, historically, we've taken that statement to hold when people are taking oral antiretroviral therapy. We don't have as much evidence for people that are not taking therapy. And as you've said, there are a very small number of people that are in this situation where they've been cured, if you like, with a bone marrow transplant. We don't have data on whether those people can transmit their virus sexually, but we would imagine that because the amount of virus in their blood is so low, just like the people who are taking treatment and who are undetectable, they have a very, very low chance of passing on their virus. If they're on oral therapy, we would say undetectable equals untransmissible. You cannot transmit your virus sexually at all. In this situation where they're not taking treatment, without the data to back that up fully, I think I'd have to say the risk is very, very low, probably approaching zero.
But could it be that the virus, once undetectable, could be like one of those, so which one is the one that where it remains there but then can be reactivated? That's the thing. So even though the viral load is low, it could still be reactivated by some other factor.
So I think that would be very unusual, but I think what's important to remember is that, of course, we don't stop monitoring these people. We do ask them to come into hospital regularly for viral load checks. We want to see if their virus is detectable. And in this case, the viral load was being checked regularly and remained undetectable off of oral treatment. So we see people for viral load blood testing very regularly to back up that statement around U equals U or undetectable equals untransmissible.
This then just because I hear the bone marrow transplant is a relatively simple operation. Am I right in imagining that? And in which case, is this something that, if it proves to be successful, could be done more frequently? And if so, is it expensive? And roughly, do we know that there are many people who have this particular gene that makes them...
Sure. No, this is not going to be a treatment that's an option for everyone living with HIV. It remains the case that bone marrow transplant is quite an involved, delicate procedure where you do have to give people drugs to prepare them for having that transplant. Of course, we also need a decent pool of donors of blood marrow. Everyone will be aware of some of the more well-publicized cases where we can't get bone marrow matches for people, particularly children who need urgent bone marrow transplants, and that can be very distressing. We know in particular that we are low on donations of solid organs and bone marrow from people who are not white, so we need more diversity in people who are prepared to donate bone marrow and other organs. And as you've also mention the proportion of people that would actually have this specific genetic change that makes people relatively resistant to HIV infection is very low. About 2% of white donors, we think, have this deletion. And I don't have precise statistics for other ethnic groups, but the proportion overall is quite low. So this would not be something that you could use for everyone who's living with HIV. At the moment, it would remain the case that we may look for this specific type of bone marrow in people who need a transplant for the type of cancer that we've mentioned. I think it's also important to remember that oral treatment is very effective for HIV.
Of course.
So at the moment, we have people who are undetectable on treatment already.
Now, and very briefly, the science behind using the bone marrow, why that particular organ, why does it work?
So you're looking really at an organ that can replete the normal cells that circulate in the blood. So if you've got a type of cancer that depletes normal cells that circulate in the blood, then you need to replace the organ that makes them, and that is the bone marrow.
Wow. Well, listen, Dr. Tristan Barker, it's really good to talk to you, and a fascinating thing. And hopefully, are we close now to a cure, yes or no? Are we close?
I think we have another type of functional cure in the type of treatment we have that's oral therapy. If you ask HIV specialists, they will always say a cure is 10 years away. There is lots of research going on in the cure space, if you like, and we really hope that within the next 10 years there may be more positive news. The World AIDS Conference is currently running in Montreal in Canada, so there may even be more data to come out of that conference in coming days.